everyone. How are you doing? I hope you guys are well and that you are interested to see what the shadow reading looks like. I've been talking about it for a while, and I have actually developed two different versions of the shadow reading, and I'm going to show you one of those today. And from this point on, this reading type is going to be available on my Patreon and my PayPal as well. I will eventually leave Patreon within a couple of months, hopefully, but don't worry, I'm going to inform all of you on how we can proceed, or whether there's going to be a transitioning period when I'm, halfway still on Patreon and moving on to my own website, which I've been working on for the last month. But enough of that for now. This reading is a reading for the monthly lottery for Kate. So this is Kate's shadow reading. And before we jump into the reading, I would just like to give you a quick rundown of what exactly the concept of the shadow is. So the shadow is basically an aspect or a segment of the self, and it comes from Jungian philosophy. So Carl Gustav Jung developed this theory of the self. So the self has multiple facets and different aspects to it. So there's not just one entity which we call the self. It has these different drawers and categories, and basically these different selves within one person. And the shadow self represents everything that we're trying to suppress, that we're trying to shun and ban and get rid of, and deny from our existence because we think it's unacceptable. But that doesn't mean that we can get rid of the shadow self. So for the most part, our shadow selves are still active and working against us in everyday life in very sneaky and tricky ways. But the other thing that's important to mention about the shadow self is that it can be a useful asset. It has quite a few positive qualities and attributes that we can integrate into our personalities, ourselves. So, Kate, this reading is going to be about how you can integrate the shadow self, how you can connect with it, because sometimes we bury the shadow self so deep down within us that it's not even easily accessible anymore. So our first task is going to be just to try to make a connection with this shadow self and see what we can find there that is still useful, that can still be utilized and integrated into your everyday existence. And we're also going to take a look at what aspects of your shadow self are keeping you from realizing your full potential, which aspects of the shadow self are holding you back or creating an obstacle in your life. So I'm just going to shuffle the cards a little longer, and then we're going to get into the reading straight away. So, the first card is going to represent you, your conscious self. So, this is sort of the ego self. And then let's move on to the persona. The persona represents the kind of the mask that you present to the outside world. So it's your social self. All right. And then one card for the shadow self. So these cards will represent the different energies that are present in these different selves. Okay. And now let's see a card to find out what you can utilize from the shadow self. And one card to see what should be eliminated, or what aspects of the shadow self should be confronted and managed and controlled in some way. Okay. And at the end of this, if it's not clear enough, we're going to draw one card to see the energy of integration, or maybe actually I feel like without that card this reading type doesn't even make sense. So I'm just going to draw one card in a second, just to have the energy of integration down as well. Here we go. All right, so let's see what we have here. So first of all, we have the Six of Swords for the ego self. Now, the Three of Swords for the shadow self. Very interesting already. The persona, the world. Okay. Things that you can utilize. The Chariot in reverse from the shadow self. And things that you need to confront is the Knight of Cups. And the energy of integration is the King of Pentacles. All right. So we have two major arcana cards. One of those is upright, and the other one is in reverse. And we have cups, pentacles, and swords. no fire. So the fire element is not represented in this reading, interestingly. Okay, so the first thing that I'm noticing here is that you have a great amount of control, conscious control over your shadow. You're not letting it run amok. You're not allowing it to cause any sort of havoc in your life, or wreak havoc. Maybe that's how the saying goes. Well, anyway, so you're not allowing it to get out of hand. You're very firmly controlling it. And you even have the energy to then project an image that is full of dynamic joy and creativity and openness and wholesomeness via your persona. But the shadow is still there. It's not too active. It's not too, like I said, it's not too much of a troublemaker in your life, because you have a very realistic way of looking at it. And you're controlling it, basically. So we have 6 and 3 of swords. The 6 of swords in the ego energy represents your readiness to use logic and your rational thinking to mediate between these two worlds, basically. The 3 of swords is very, very different than the world. There's a huge gap, a huge discrepancy between these two energies. And the ego has the energy of a mediator in between. And your power of mediation comes from your ability to have a very matter-of-fact and very, I'm going to say, impartial, almost objective look at who you are and what's going on within you. So you're almost detached from the shadow self. You're making a distinction. You're saying all of those things that the shadow represents, they are not me. And in a way, you are right. They are not you. But also, the world is not you. You're most comfortable in the energy of the world. You're most comfortable in your persona when you're able to connect with other people, when you're able to present yourself and your ideas and your universe to other people the way you want to do it and how you see fit. That's when you're most comfortable and you're most confident. However, deep down, we have the 3 of swords energy present in this reading to represent the shadow side. Now, the 3 of swords is an energy of not only disappointment, but also dissatisfaction with circumstances, with other people, with life in general. And since we have swords here, both of these cards are based in air, the element of air. So mentality, thinking, and being rational. Although the 3 of swords can be pretty irrational, because this card says basically that you cannot trust anyone, that you're all on your own, and that the world is a cold, hard place. This is what the Three of Swords represents, is that there is no joy in trying to connect with other people. So it's basically the exact opposite of the world. That there is no reason to want to go deep with anyone else. This is a card of disappointment with social interactions, of betrayal, of paranoia even. And so all of your doubts and all of your negative feelings regarding people and social life were transported and packaged up and hidden within the shadow self. So you're not displaying these feelings of distrust and dissatisfaction to the world in any way. There's this filter of the Six of Swords that says, okay, let's have a look at this. Let's just study this. Let's examine this, break it down, and understand it, and ultimately move as far away from it as we can. So by labeling it, by categorizing it, this is my depression, this is my social anxiety, this is my whatever, by diagnosing it, so to say, you're removing yourself from it. And that way you can find your comfort zone outside of yourself. You're probably a very outgoing, very open, very warm person. And you might not even consciously recognize that deep down the surface, down below the surface, there's these moodiness, which is represented by the Knight of Cups, by the way. So that's one of the aspects of the shadow that is actively working against you, that you need to try and take charge of, or try to confront somehow. So even with your level-headed approach of the Six of Swords, every now and then the shadow comes to the surface with this bubbling rage of, why are people not returning my favors? Why are people not on the same level of passion as I am? Why are people not as fully engaged as I am? Because the world is suggesting to me that whenever you go out into the world, whenever you need to present yourself or present a project or introduce yourself or enter into a new situation, challenge anything, you put your entire being into it. So it's kind of like your persona is full of life, but your ego and your shadow is almost vacant. So there's almost a vacuum of energy there. And so the shadow self tries to, in some way, gain back his power by finding things that he can be upset about. So the shadow is basically struggling for its existence. You are denying its existence, but it's trying to prove that it's alive and well, that it has valid feelings. And so the Knight of Cups presents itself or expresses itself in situations where you feel comfortable enough to display these mood swings or these extremes of emotion. So most likely in your intimate relationships, your friendships, and your family. And the Knight of Cups, knights are always kind of unreliable. They have a lot of knowledge already, so they are not complete beginners like the pages are, but they are also not experts like the kings. So they are kind of in between. And the cups represent emotions. So the knights can be, when positively aspected, the knights can be very enthusiastic, full of energy, full of joy, etc. But when the knights represent a problem, they represent this problem of unreliability. So there's emotional unreliability that stems from the denied shadow self. So, and what can you utilize? What is an actual positive side of the shadow self? We have the Chariot in reverse. So actually there's a hidden gem within the shadow self that if you keep denying that it exists, if you keep trying to separate yourself from the shadow, you will never discover. And this is the gift and the blessing of having no will, no individual will. This is the freaky thing about the shadow, I think, that makes it really exciting, is that it seems to be controlled and manipulated and animated by forces that are beyond our control. So the shadow self is deeply rooted within the subconscious mind. And that's one of its values and interesting attributes that you can get in contact with and that you can learn from. So, and I'm deriving this from the fact that the Chariot is in reverse. The Chariot upright would represent actually the ego. So I always equate the Chariot with the energy of the ego. And so in reverse, we have this lack of willpower, a lack of individuality, a lack of individual willpower. So it is telling me that there's something that you don't even know about yourself that resides within your shadow self. This interesting energy that does not come from your ego, that has nothing to do with your persona, and that you can learn a lot from. So how do we integrate the shadow self? That's the question here. And so since there's this huge disconnect with the swords and this major arcana card, the world, it's not an easy process, and it's also not a quick process. But we have the King of Pentacles here, suggesting to me that it is possible, and the best way to approach it is by remaining practical. So actually the Six of Swords is not a bad approach, in that it does not kill. So you're not being aggressive, you're not trying to aggressively push the shadow self behind the scenes. or beyond the limits or boundaries of your consciousness. You're not trying to get rid of it, but you are still being very rational about it, and you're trying your best to remain calm and cool and cold about it. Now, with the King of Pentacles, the King representing the highest level of expertise, and Pentacles representing earthy energy, what we have here is an invitation from the universe to start building an environment by taking practical actions that you can understand and that you can connect with on a material level, a very practical level. So taking actions that make a pragmatic sense, that promote prosperity, abundance, and basically it could also be a card of building a career. So focusing on your career, focusing on your ability to be a good decision maker, and your ability to build a life around you that allows you to safely experiment with the shadow self. So again, I'm seeing this as a really, really long and slow process, because the shadow self is so disciplined and so much trained to stay hidden that it's not that easy to allow it to come to the surface. But that's how you do it. So you're not reaching in and pulling it out. You're building a structure. You're building an environment around you that will make it possible for your frustrations, your dissatisfaction, your disappointments, your negativity to come to the surface in a safe environment. And what I mean by that is perhaps in many ways not allowing the shadow self to manifest in any conscious way was a decision that was, like I said, controlled by or made by your conscious ego mind, to not get in trouble, to not get in financial trouble, to not lose career opportunities, to not miss out on a chance to grow or build your network of people. So there was a pragmatic attitude behind your urge and your ability to curb your shadow self. Now, you've done such a good job of training it to stay silent and to stay hidden, that the only way to bring it out again is to make sure that you're at a position in life where you cannot be hurt financially. Well, obviously, that's a point that is objectively non-existent, because you can always lose everything, anything and everything in life. But to reach a point of abundance where you don't need to worry about losing opportunities anymore, where you don't need to play along with anyone, where you don't need to keep up this very controlled, very disciplined ego game of virtue, of being virtuous at all times. where you can allow yourself to become like a naughty child if necessary, because that's also part of you. That's also something that exists within you. This negativity, this frustration, this irritation towards the world, even though you love people. I can tell that you love people and that you love being around them. You have a lot of complaints deep within about people that you cannot afford to come to the surface right now. So that's the energy of integration. The energy of integration is building long-lasting, reliable structures around you and within you. So a good network of people who keep you afloat, a good financial and career systems that support you, perhaps multiple sources of income, just a lot of stability that is going to communicate to your subconscious mind that it's okay to release the shadow side a little bit. And when that happens, that's when some interesting processes can start to manifest. That's when you can start to access the chariot reversed energies. So how long is it gonna take? I don't know. It depends on where you are on this pathway, according to your own estimation. Where are you? Are you a Page of Pentacles, a Knight of Pentacles, a Queen of Pentacles, perhaps only an Ace of Pentacles? So just the idea of a thought, of a possibility of perhaps maybe somehow starting something? Or are you pretty far along down the line of creating stability for yourself on the material level? Well, that's up for you to decide, and I think you must have already been working on this, because otherwise the King of Pentacles would not really show up, I think. So I think you're probably already at a Knight or Queen level. So I hope that you enjoy this reading. I hope that you could take something away from it. Thank you for your support. Thank you for everyone who has decided to stay and watch this video. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everyone. And see you in my next video.